Well, you guys asked for it, and I promised I would deliver. Today we will look at my top 50 light novels. Now, I've read a good amount of light novels over the years, some good, some not so good, and I felt it was time to compile them in some kind of list. Now, to keep things fair, I've ensured that I've only included series legally available in English, and ones I've finished at least one volume of. I'm also not taking into consideration the anime. Now keep in mind this is my own personal list, so as always expect some titles you may not expect in other people's lists, but to be honest I consider each and every one of these titles to be worth checking out at some point. Let's go, shall we? We start with An Ideal Sponge of Life, brought to us in English by J Novel Club. A young office worker is summoned to a tropical world. He soon discovers that the Queen of the Kingdom, Queen Aura, needs an heir, and he's going to be the one to provide it. While the synopsis of this title is something I would say is pretty standard, what I loved about this one was the fact that it was pretty in depth with getting things set up for going to another world. Think yourself, what would you take? What would you leave? You can't take everything. You would want something to make yourself as comfortable as possible. And when you get there, we don't get a traditional fantasy world as we would expect in other series. It's more of a desert kingdom, and for those reasons, this one feels quite unique. I really enjoyed it for that. The world feels fresh and unique, and it focuses on the policies and politics of the kingdom around it. It's a lot of good fun. My next title is one that I read volume 1 of quite some time ago, and it was pretty hilarious at the time. Didn't I say to make my abilities average in the next life is another fun isekai with a fun twist. A young girl is transported to another world. When given the option to get, well, superpowers, she just wants to be average. Of course, once you factor in the power of dragons and other ultimate beings, an average human is still more overpowered than your average person in this world. This is the overpowered character trope done right in my opinion. A series I really enjoyed, really fun, really funny, and I look forward to reading a lot more of it. Next up we have another one which I adored volume 1 of, but I never really went any further with it. The Empty Box and Zero of Maria. Now this was a title I picked up after hearing other people rant and rave about it, and it was worth the investment. A young man enjoys his carefree life at school every day. However, when a beautiful new transfer student appears, she declares war on him instantly. Now this isn't a fun, cheeky kind of war either, as now Kazuki Hoshino's life is delicately in the balance. This is one of those mysterious stories where I feel the more I see about it, the more I'll spoil. So I'd recommend going in as blind as possible. Sadly, this series is long out of print, but hey, you can pick it up digitally rather easily. Definitely want to try and see if you enjoy it. A Certain Magical Index and its latter series, A Certain Scientific Railgun, were titles that were once again recommended to me for so long. These, and much like some other series we will get to shortly, were titles that I picked up after hearing the hype, read one volume, enjoyed it, then was almost instantly put off by the subsequent volume count. I am only one person after all. This series focuses on a young man named Tuma Kamijo, a powerless level 0 Esper who lives in Academia City, a place where everyone has, well, basically superpowers. His special quirk, stand Devil Fruit power, is that he can nullify any other powers. Yes, just like that other character we all know and love. A chance meeting with a young girl calling herself Index lands on Toma's balcony and explains she's been hunted by magicians. He agrees to help her, which then opens up a whole new world for him. This series was one I had a lot of fun with volume 1, although I have to admit a student getting overpowered powers isn't something that normally tickles my fancy, and it's not the last time we'll see a similar premise pop up in this list at all. It's one of those daft stories you can turn your brain off to and just have a good time with it. Now, I'm not going to lie to you guys, we are going to see a lot of isekai on this list. It is a light novel list after all. However, one that I read late last year stuck out to me as being pretty unique. That title was Her Majesty's Swarm. Rather than your usual fare of being transported into another world and being overpowered in the fantasy world, our young protagonist is transported into a world very similar to the strategy title she plays. And that's what hooked me with this one. People have commented that the race she becomes part of is very similar to one called the Zerg from StarCraft, but I really enjoyed this one. She's essentially in charge of a spider species, and the only way to not die is, well, to kill everything else. If you've ever played StarCraft, Warcraft, or Age of Empires, I feel you guys may have an idea of what I'm getting at here, and Her Majesty's Swarm is certainly a fun example of that. I've heard that future volumes aren't quite as good as the first, but at this point I can only go off what I know, and I know I really enjoyed Volume 1. We come across overpowered heroes a lot in isekai and shonen titles, but what if the hero was overpowered but also overly cautious? This one is set up more like a gag series, but it works for it. A young goddess summons an everyday guy from another world. He quickly becomes, well, overpowered. However, he's seen this type of thing before, and he becomes instantly overprepared. He'll spend hours just grinding for the next level, overkilling all of the monsters with multiple spells, and buying multiple suits of armour, just in case. He plays like some gamers will. It's one of those titles that pokes fun at the absurdity of overpowered characters as a whole, but I feel it really works quite well for it. I can relate more to a character that is overpowered but has a brain behind them, rather than someone who's just overpowered because reasons, and that's why this one's on the list. The next series is another that, well, again, I adored the first volume but never really got around to reading more of it. Date A Live was one that really had an interesting setup. After an unprecedented disaster known as spatial quakes, humanity has tried to adapt and survive around it. One day, a young man, Shido Itsuka, gets caught in a spatial quake. Surviving the blast, he discovers that the cause of these quakes is from young girls known as spirits. Itsuka is quickly brought into an organisation dedicated to reducing the threat by these spirits. Peacefully. By dating them. This is one of those series that if you explain to most people, they just look at you in a funny way, but this one lands it rather well. Dating the girls rather than being super OP and fighting them is a nice refreshing way to look at it, and it's pretty cute too. It's not going to win any romance awards, but it definitely has a place. Check it out. Another title with a hapless hero with an overpowered skill and a harem of girls, and we have High School DxD. Probably one of the most famous examples of a light novel title, and, you know, it is a fun one. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I was really put off by this one initially as the anime felt really immature. However, what I got was an actual, genuine, fun battle series. A young man is over his head as a beautiful classmate asks him out. He soon discovers she isn't what he initially thought and is actually a fallen angel. And because this is anime, we all know they are evil. He is then saved by another beautiful woman, the devil Rias Grimoire, who takes him under her wings by reincarnating him and making him to be a servant. And so the battle between angels and devils starts again. Now, much like Date A Live and Magical Index, this is one that may not be the most unique of plots, but we do have a lot of fun with it. And this one I do look to check out again in the near future, once I get some time. It's an interesting ride. When there's something strange in the neighbourhood, who are you going to call? Well, Dungeon Busters, I suppose. A man discovers a mysterious space in his yard. When he steps into it, he discovers he's entered the first dungeon in the world. He discovers from the mysterious beauty Akane that the world will soon be doomed if all of the 666 dungeons are not cleared. And so he decides to form a crew to clear them all. Now, what I loved about this one was that it felt like it was an adult take on a lot of the overpowered dungeon crawling series that are currently out. A breath of fresh air in a genre that is very rapidly starting to become very stale. This is one that I recently covered in depth and loved every second of it, so I recommend checking out that video too if you want to know more. I'll leave a link in the comments below so you can go check that one out. Next up we have the rather wordly I've been killing slimes for 300 years and maxed out my level. Now, when an overworked corporate slave dies of overwork, she is reincarnated into another world by a goddess who bestows upon her immortality alongside a peaceful life in another world. Her new peaceful life is spent protecting a nearby town and killing the weak slimes around it for, well, pocket money. However, due to living a long life, she eventually discovers that she's reached level 99. Soon everyone is knocking on her door asking for fights or, well, assistance, and soon Azusa begins to build a family and life around others, enjoying it more than what she was when she was alone. This is incredibly comfy. This is a really comfy series, something that I've been, well, really enjoying for the last few months. This is the perfect series if you just want something to relax on a lazy Sunday afternoon with. Absolute lovely stuff. I would recommend it. Next up is a title that I've just recently read volume 3 of, and honestly, I think this one's going to be huge in the near future. We have Harry Potter. Reign of the Seven Spellblades. Magic is real, and there's a wizarding school. However, to Oliver Horn and other students, there's more to the school that meets the eye, as mysterious labyrinths, monsters, and other threats begin to emerge within. For this one, think Harry Potter, only with knights, samurai, and honestly a feeling of it being a little bit more darker and a little bit more complete. It's a series that once again relies on you knowing as little as possible, and a lot of the twists presented early on are superb and worth the admission alone. Believe me, when this gets an anime, it'll be huge. Get on this while you still can. Next up is another superb title that I read at the start of the year and kind of just didn't do a video on it. Don't think that's bad, however, as Apocryphy Diaries is probably one of the most unique light novels out there. A young girl named Mao Mao is an ordinary girl in an ordinary town. She is kidnapped and sold into service into the palace ruled by the Emperor. There she is intended to be a consort or a serving woman. Very quickly her true skills become apparent and she's put in a position serving the Emperor's favourite consort as a food taster for poison. Honestly, this one's real interesting, focusing on the day-to-day lives of the people in the palace and the many mysteries that surround it. It's part slice of life, part historical, part mystery. It's one that I was hooked on as soon as I got into it, and, you know, it's one that I feel like needs a lot more attention focused onto it. There's also a superb manga out there which people are saying it's 6 or 2 frees, so either way I would really recommend checking this one out. I'd love to see more people talking about it. Our next title is one that everyone always asks me to cover, one that people just assume I haven't read, and I suppose it's finally time. Classroom of the Elite is certainly a thing that I've read. And you know what? It's pretty good. In a certain school there is a certain classroom, all set up to house the inferior students. And the series revolves around this. The classroom, the students, and their attempts to become better than the labels that they've been given. Now this is one I'd love to get into a little bit more. Despite being a school setting, the premise is rather interesting, and the cast so far are decent too. It's worth the hype. I read this one last year and put it down, but I'm now looking at giving it another shot. Watch this space for updates on how I go. But hey, with the first 2 volumes, I did really enjoy myself, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this one turns out, and if it's worth all of the hype that you guys are giving it. Our next title is another one where if I'd read a little bit more of it, it probably would be a little bit higher on this list. Possibly. This is a pretty stacked list after all. Mushoku Tensei is essentially the structure work where a lot of future isekai is based on. A young boy is reincarnated into another world and starts becoming super overpowered due to his natural skill of being, well, reincarnated? Fortunately, this series manages to stand out with interesting characters and being an easy enough read. You can just blast through a volume and have a fun time with it. It's definitely one I'd recommend to newcomers to the medium or for ones who just want to look back and understand why the isekai medium really took off. It's an interesting read, but one I think a lot of people will enjoy. Next up we have a title that is designed to prepare you for your next isekai adventure, be it holiday or, well, dying and getting reincarnated. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Isekai is a one-shot title that looks at how to prepare yourself when you, well, either accidentally or purposely get transported into another world, because hey, it's all just waiting to happen for you. Bring together a few well-known isekai authors to give you tips on your future trip. Now, this is one of those titles that is just fun, and it's pretty unique, but it's easy for anybody who has read their fair share of light novels and just wants something that not only pokes fun at the whole medium, but also looks at the logistics about being transported to that other world, weighing up if a truck is better than, well, just a portal. It's one that I feel should get a lot more attention than it does, and J-Novel Club have really done a great job in getting this translated and put out for us. As it's a one-shot, it's hard to fault it, but I do wish there was a little bit more than what there was. My next title is Unnamed Memory, A title that I've spoken about on a number of occasions in the last year, and honestly I can't praise this one enough. A romantic fantasy about a young prince cursed that his wife will never bear him a child. He sets out to find the Witch of the Azure Moon. Upon meeting her and discovering how beautiful she is, he immediately asks her to marry him. Denying his request, she agrees to an alternative, living with him in the palace for a year to discover a way to stop the curse. Honestly, I loved what I read of this one. It was a nice change to have a pure fantasy that doesn't follow all of the usual trappings of the isekai genre. And, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit of a sucker for a good romance. Having that combined with a fantasy that's, in my opinion, pretty well written, this is definitely one to keep an eye out on. There's only 6 volumes in Japan, so it's an easy one to collect and just binge read, I suppose. Have you ever thought that a protagonist may get sent to another world, but instead of fighting everything, just wants to improve it? Here we have the ultra-political kingdom building series, How a Realist Hero Rebuilt the Kingdom. Another one released by J Novel Club, and it's one of those series that goes in so deep, I really enjoy it. A young man is summoned to another world. He quickly manages to convince the king to abdicate the throne and put him in charge. His task? Rebuilding the kingdom. For those who love the political aspects and city/kingdom building in That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime, you'll be right at home here. Just about everything has been thought of when it comes to this series, which just makes it all the more better in my opinion. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think it's worth checking out. Next up is a rather mysterious title. Because hey, we need something to alternate between the influx of isekai we're about to discuss. Boogiepop is a classic of a series, and what I feel doesn't get the attention it deserves, despite actually technically kickstarting the whole light novel trend in Japan. It really hasn't taken off over in the West. Again, it's another one of those titles where the less you know, the better. Each chapter focuses on a different character or a different time frame to give a picture into the overall storyline, and it works remarkably well. If you want a good mystery light novel, then I'd really recommend checking this one out. Unfortunately, and this is one of the reasons I couldn't rank it any higher, a lot of the series is unfortunately missing. They didn't actually translate all of it into English. Hopefully, someday that'll be rectified. But still, it's still worth checking out, at least from what you can get. Next up we have My Life as a Villainess, All Routes Lead to Doom, a somewhat reverse harem of a series. A young girl who loves otome games is reincarnated into another world. Things are going incredibly well for her, until she realises that she's been reincarnated as the villainess in the same game she used to play. The twist? All routes will ultimately end up with her being killed or cast out. It's not looking good. Honestly, I really love the concept of this series, and the series itself is amazingly put together. The lead character tries so hard to change things, she just ends up putting herself closer and closer to having a good end. Well, not really. She puts herself closer and closer to having the bad end. It's just one of those series you can just read and smile at it. I've read volume 1 and I loved it, and it's one that I really want to check more out. Because it's so high on this list, I think I might do that. I might go out and buy it. If only I didn't have so many other titles to read. Oh well, watch this space, I will be covering more of this one very shortly. My next title is one that I recently begun reading as a palate cleanser. I was getting a little tired of light novels, so just wanted to try something that could just, you know, rejig me into wanting to read again. And honestly, Suppose a Kid from the Last Dungeon Boonies Comes to Live in a Starter Town is the perfect title for this. A young man moves from the town next to the final dungeon, where everybody is super overpowered, and to the starter town. Being the weakest in the town, he's got a serious inferior complex, but of course, he's super overpowered compared to the people in the starter town. I'm not gonna lie, this isn't the best written series, but what it makes for is just plain stupid fun. A lot of the characters are unique in their own way, and there's a lot of moments that feel very well done in terms of battle shonen. It does its job of just being a fun gag series. Simple fun. Next. Cooking with Wild Game is another one that I've spoken about a few times. A Kuken isekai manga that involves, you guessed it, the Kuken of Wild Game. A young man is isekai to a seemingly prehistoric world, one where one must hunt to eat, and eat to survive. He soon befriends the beautiful Aifa, a huntress, and he begins to cook what she kills. This is another one where the protagonist has a unique skill that is well suited for the world he's in, but he's overall pretty weak. I like that. I like the fact that he was having to rely on somebody else in order to survive. I really loved how it focuses on the hunting, preparing and eating of the food itself. Sometimes entire volumes will be taken up just for one dish, and you can really tell the author has done their homework when creating it. It's a real good treat, so I'd recommend checking this one out sometime. Have you ever read a series that should have been a mega hit when the anime came around, but instead was a huge disaster? If so, you've probably at least heard of Infinite Dendrogram. This is one that I've been following on and off for some time, and honestly, I can't stress how much I love it. A young man is excited to get into the latest VR MMO, Infinite Dendrogram, a title that promises to give you the most realistic experience, not only in senses, but in the world around you. And honestly, this title really delivers on that one, providing a really interesting, unique world that feels very familiar still. Added to this, the Embryo system, something that fans of Xenoblade 2 may liken to its blade system. Added to this is a heap of epic fights. It's really one that I really expected to have a great anime adaptation. Sadly, it wasn't to be, but hey, at least the light novel is still worth checking out if you can get it. I wasn't sure whether to put this one as an adaptation of a manga, but honestly, it's one that actually exceeds the source material somehow. Interspecies Reviewers has its very own light novel series that goes well beyond the manga and gives us a whole new experience. Now, this isn't a series that I can really just encourage every Tom or Annie to pick up. Of course, you've got to be into the whole monster girl, ecchi stuff. But Interspecies Reviewers goes beyond ecchi and straight into full-on hentai, which for a series about having, well, you know, with monster girls, kind of works a little bit better than the source material. You get everything in so much material, so if you enjoyed the manga and want something a little bit further, you'll enjoy the light novel even more. I guarantee it. Next up we have the poster child for when people want to make fun of the isekai genre. In Reincarnated as a Vending Machine, I Now Wander the Dungeon. A man is reborn as, well, you guessed it, a vending machine. Now this is one that I too felt sounded incredibly silly, but it is as silly as it sounds. But what we actually have here is a surprisingly good series in which the usefulness of a vending machine of all things can come in handy in a fantasy world, either via fighting or just interacting with townsfolk. It's surprisingly competent in how well it's done. I always think of it like Majora's Mask or the Trail series, where it really focuses on the townsfolk and their day-to-day lives, while having this vending machine, or this person as a vending machine, as a central character. It's quite interesting in the way it's done. Now, if only we could get that volume 4. It's been years now. Next up we have another title which, again, I think people look at it and just think, yeah, this is a joke series. And I can certainly see why. A title of Do You Love Your Mom and a 2-hit multi-target attacks is one that most people will simply write off immediately. And, you know, there's a good reason for that. Look beyond the silly title and concept and you have what may be one of the most underrated and unique titles. A young man takes part in an RPG that aims to get children closer to their mothers, and this world is literally designed to do so. While he may be overpowered, his mother is even more so, defeating everything before he can even get his sword out. And there's a lot of good fun on top of it. This series knows it's a joke, but crafts an incredibly fun, unique world. It's worth checking out just to see some of the genuine fun concepts that one can have with this medium. I'd really recommend it, if you can get past the whole concept, that is. The next title we have is one who's also maybe familiar to fans of the isekai genre. Before there was Konosuba, there was Combatants Will Be Dispatched. After Konosuba, there was also Combatants Will Be Dispatched. A supervillain is tasked with taking over the planet. He's given the equipment and a powerful assistant. However, he ends up stranded and struggling to take control. This is one of those series where sometimes the comedy hits, but sometimes it doesn't. Having horrible people be horrible to each other kind of makes sense with a supervillain character, but I don't think it's done quite as well as Konosuba. Still, there's some fun to be had with this one. Enough that I kind of enjoy myself whenever I pick up a new volume. It's hit or miss for some people. It's time for maximum comfort with The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten. I spoke about this one briefly earlier in the year and, you know, I'd love to talk about it in a little bit more depth. Mahiru is a beautiful girl who everyone calls an angel. She's almost unapproachable as everybody absolutely adores her. Next door to her is Amane, an average guy who is a self-admitted slob. The two soon befriend each other and we have a really cute story that results in people being genuinely nice to each other. far cry from combatants will be dispatched, I suppose. It's refreshing to have a series that, rather than having an unpopular guy be a hit with everybody, two rather lonely people manage to make each other feel better. A genuine treat. Speaking of unpopular guys being popular, next up we have the absolutely huge Monogatari series. A series I have quite mixed feelings on. I find with each volume I either love it or find it quite tedious to the point I kind of burn myself out rather quickly on it. But I also adore the wordplay and the creativity of the author. It's a title that I feel that everybody who wants to try light novels has to at least give a shot with at some point. Each volume is full of witty wordplay and intriguing conversations, and I love that. Monogatari deserves a lot of the love it's given. Although I've got to admit, my favourite one is Kizu Monogatari. It is time for Torture Princess, another series that would be a ton higher on this list if I'd probably just read more of it. But wow, this is such a great series. A young man is strangled to death by his father. He is then summoned to another world by the Torture Princess. Working as her butler, he has to aid her in destroying demons that torment the world. Honestly, if you like your gory series, much like Berserk or other ones similar to that, this one is a must read, and one that I'm really surprised doesn't get nearly as much love as it could. If it ever gets an anime, I feel it'll be huge. Not for the faint of heart, but, I think it's worth at least trying out. It's one of those ones I feel like a lot of people would enjoy it if they at least give it a try. Our next series is one that I wasn't sure whether to combine with another, and this one is Katanagatari. While not part of the Monogatari series, it is written by the same author. It also kind of is part of the Monogatari series, but hey, I'm going to choose to include this one separately. This one's a little bit more action based than Monogatari, so if you love Kizu Monogatari, it's definitely one to check out. If you love Inisi Oisin's works and wanting something a little bit more, I'd recommend checking this one out. The releases that we are getting are absolutely beautiful, 3-in-1 titles. Really, if you love Monogatari, this one is next on your must-read list. Personally, I like it a little bit more. I felt overall it was a little bit more stronger than Monogatari itself. Either way, still great. Next up is bottom tier character Tomozaki-kun, another slice of life title that I really got hooked on for a while. A young man is amazing at a game, not unlike Super Smash Bros. However, he soon discovers a new rival. He agrees to meet this rival in real life, before discovering she is the most popular girl in school. She's initially disappointed her rival is the slob Tomozaki. She then sets him out on a new game, to improve his image. This is another one of those slice of life school based series that actually worked for me. While I find a lot of these titles to be rather hit and miss, there was something about this one that I really enjoyed. I liked the whole idea of the main character not being particularly perfect, and actually admitting that they've got flaws and working on improving them. It's one of those ones where you could call it a kind of a self-help manga, light novel, anime. It's weird, but it's a lot of fun. I would really recommend it. Another series which I feel is very overlooked when it comes to light novels is the fantastic sound Euphonium. Now, this is one that has a fantastic anime, but the book is actually worth picking up too. It's a simple story, following that of a school band that is at first pretty terrible. However, with some new blood and a new director, they start to turn things around. It's not a unique premise, but it's rather wonderfully done. The characters and the interactions and development are all fantastic, and it really pushes this one up. Sadly, this is one where the light novel came out and, well, it didn't do too well, meaning there's actually only the one volume in English. Hopefully we will see more of it, but as a one and done series, it's one of the best. Our next title is one that I only just got into recently, but I can see instantly the appeal as soon as I read the first chapter. The Haruhi series is a classic, one that I really feel changed the landscape of anime on a whole, and the light novel is absolutely fantastic. As of writing this, I've read a whopping total of 3 volumes, so I don't know all the intricacies and developments later on. I know the next volume I've got to read is supposed to be a fan favourite. The SOS Brigade is an after-school club with a mission to seek out the extraordinary. Their other mission is to keep Haruhi Suzumiya happy. While she is unaware of it, she has the power to destroy the universe. This is just one of those series that is just so over the top and goofy, but so well done I can't not love it. If you've ever been interested in the series, I'd recommend giving it a go. I mean, Yen Press have just recently released all of the volumes, so now's a good time as ever. Look at the time, it's Magic Hour, the first of the Shoji Gato series on this list in Amagi Brilliant Park. Now this was a series that I absolutely adored the anime for, and was really excited to start reading the source material. I was waiting for the physical light novel to get released, but it never did, so I'm glad I did pick it up on J-Novel Club's digital subscription. Seiya Kanye is egotistical, vain, and a pain to work with. However, he's chosen to run a struggling theme park. Can he turn it around? Using unorthodox methods, he'll get the results he desires, or at least working everyone into the ground in the process. This is definitely one I'd recommend checking out if you like the hook and if you have some interest in a slice of life theme park management light novel. A theme park management / slice of life title isn't something you'd see every day, and this definitely proves the rule of having a strange premise can actually pay off. This one's got a lot of fun with it, and I think that it is one of the more stronger slice of life titles out there. Sadly, I cannot put Kino's Journey on this list. I am, of course, only picking titles legally available, and, well, ones I've read. But we have the next best thing here. This is the story of a witch who travels the world, seeking nothing in particular. She's free to wander wherever the wind blows, adding to the story of whoever she meets along the way. Wandering Witch is a strange one. It's one that people either love or they hate. But for me, the relaxing journey that gets that little bit dark with every new person the main character, Elena, meets, it's one that I think is perfect for those who may not be able to sit and binge an entire novel in a day. Instead, focus on small stories with an overarching narrative. It's a lot of fun and, you know, it's not really something completely unique, but you can see it's been inspired by Kino, and it does a lot of things that Kino does well. Top 15, and here we have the title that will make most of you spit your tea out in surprise. Please ensure you have tea ready. If not, well, any other beverage will do. Get ready, spit out in 3, 2... You know, I can't not talk about Monster Girl Doctor. This is another one of those titles that I just expected so little of, but ends up becoming one of my favourites. And it's one that I'm always excited for whenever a new volume decides to come out. In a fantasy world where monster girls are real, a young doctor is studying to become a monster girl doctor. That's right, he is becoming the title. He actually reaches his goal rather fast, and opens up a practice. This is the story of the monster girls he meets and their ailments, and the love, and the ecchi. Yeah, it's one of those ones, unsurprisingly. I mean, monster girls. Honestly, this is an incredibly well put together series. The world presented has been really rather well thought out. Each of the characters are super fun, and the ailments are all things that make sense for the type of monster girl they are. Sure, it's ecchi, but, you know, there's been a lot of love and actual effort put into this one that it quickly became one of, if not my most favourite Monster Girl series. And I feel it definitely deserves to be on this list. Probably the newest release on this list, and it's one that I instantly fell in love with. Bofuri, I don't want to get hurt so I maxed out my defense, combines a few things I love. 1, it's a light novel. 2, fantasy setting. 3, fun over the top, extremely well written battles. 4, cute girls doing cute things. Probably the most deadliest of combinations. A young girl is excited to play a new MMO. Not wanting to get hurt, she pours all of her stats into defense, creating a character who cannot get hurt. While she's just having fun, she ultimately becomes so broken that it affects the entire trajectory of the game. Now, this is one of those titles that is just so much fun to read. It's nothing taxing on the brain, and it's the perfect one to read between more taxing franchises. Each and every character is just pure fun. You're going to have a great time if you just like the whole cute girl doing cute things, but if you also want a fun, over-the-top, stat-based MMO fantasy game, light novel, you know the one. Sword Art Online in maximum overdrive, I suppose. But yeah, this one, overall it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It's a really easy read, but it's got a lot of really good things going for it. Next up is a title that I picked up late last year and covered on the channel. 86 is an absolute beast of a series, one that I feel appeals to people who may not be fans of light novels themselves. War is Hell. The Republic of San Magnolia has been under attack from the neighbouring Giardian Empire's army of unmanned drones for years. After years of research, the Republic have finally developed unmanned drones of their own. Or have they? This is another one of those series in which the more you know about the series, the more it spoils the plot. Focusing on the horrors of war and the lies and secrets hidden away, it's one that I fell in love with as soon as I picked it up. If you want something a little bit different, a little bit more sci-fi, I would recommend checking this one out. The next title is one that I've just finished binge reading, which may have actually elevated it a little bit higher. But don't let that put you off, because I feel this is one that absolutely deserves to be on this list. Restaurant to Another World is the perfect title if you love food. There is a place that links the fantasy world with ours, and that place is the restaurant Western Cuisine Nekoya. Every Saturday its doors opens to the other world, allowing the denizens to fill their bellies. From elves to samurai, dragons to vampires, each and every customer is unique and different in every way. What I love about this series is that we only get snapshots of the fantasy world itself, told by the perspective of each customer before they enter the restaurant and make their order. It's one that I've really come to adore. Much like Wonder and Witch, this is a number of short stories all linked with the glory of food. A title I feel really should get a lot more love than it actually does. If you like food, if you like light novels, if you want something incredibly easy to read, you do yourself a favour and check out Restaurant to Another World. We've spoken about a lot of books in this video. Well, around 38 or so at this point if I'm counting correctly. And the next series is one that focuses on, well, a lover of books. A bookworm to be exact. A college girl who loves books dies in a freak accident, well, involving books, and is reborn into another world. She is now Mine, a sickly 5-year-old, daughter of a poor soldier. To make things worse, the world she's been reborn in has a low literacy rate and books are a luxury. But if she can't afford a book, she'll create her own. This is a series I absolutely adored until I fell behind on and kind of just didn't catch up with it. I resolved myself to go back to the start and reread it all, so I started buying it physically. While I've not honoured that quite yet, don't feel like this puts the series down in any way. This is one of the best light novels out there. It's so refreshing to see a character reborn as someone weak, and having to use their knowledge to corner a market. It's part isekai, part creation and part economics, and it just works in such a wonderful way. I always look at this one as a fun, unique isekai title that haters of the genre should really check out, but if you're a lover of the genre, you're gonna get a lot of great content out of this one. I can't recommend it enough. Hitting my top 10 now, and it's my very first light novel, Full Metal Panic, a title that I've only grown to love more over the years. Moving from being one of my first anime to my first light novel, and personally, I just really love this one. J Novel Club have done a fantastic job of getting this one out in the West again, and I love the new hardback editions. It's Soldier Boy meets girl as Sosuke Sakura is assigned to protect Kaname Chidori. He reads military magazines, brings grenades to school, fires rifles from the school roof, all in the name of peace. This is of course, the fish out of water story that we've kind of seen time and time again, but this series has a little bit of everything for me. Action, romance, comedy, and of course, giant robots. It's one of those titles that I was just unsure if nostalgia was just hitting hard with it, or if it was genuinely good. But in my opinion, this is one of the best ones. Definitely worth checking out. Number 9 is time to talk about bunnies. Or, well, bunny girls at least. No, this isn't another Monster Girl series, instead we have the utterly fantastic Rascal Does Not Dream series. A young man, Sakuta, starts to find a bunny girl, Mai Sakurajima, a girl famous for her acting career in his local library. However, she's dressed up as a bunny girl because she believes that nobody can see her. This kicks off a whole host of storylines revolving around what is known as adolescence syndrome. Now, this is what I heard so many good things about from the anime itself, and I wasn't disappointed when the light novel lived up to the hype. I feel that this was one that went so deep on everything, I couldn't help but love it. If you like the Monogatari series, I'd recommend checking this one out. Personally, I enjoy this a little bit more than Monogatari itself, but either way, both are fantastic. Number 8, and we have probably the most difficult light novel to read, one that I often just, straight up call a novel. This is the saga of Tanya the Evil. A ruthless businessman is pushed in front of an oncoming train and ultimately ends up, upsetting God. As his punishment, he is reborn as Tanya Dergashaf, a young girl living in an alternate version of Europe during World War 1. This series goes so in depth with the military history, it reads more like war memoirs. Tanya, of course, becomes super overpowered and is constantly thrown into kill or be killed situations in a war that, quite frankly, she's never ever going to win. Yet despite everything being put against her, she manages to succeed, further prolonging the war. Now, this isn't one that everybody's going to enjoy. The first few volumes are so different to what you'd expect of a light novel that it may put you off. But once you get into it, you will be hooked. There's so much care and attention done into this one. For example, they have done their research. They have done their research on military maneuvers and actual historic facts. I was quite surprised to see some historic facts from a neighbouring town being put into an early volume. I couldn't believe it. This creator knew more about my history than I did. Amazing. Next up, we have a currently ongoing anime title, and one that I got into a few years ago and absolutely fell in love with it. That time I got reincarnated as a slime, and you know, I've actually went back and forth on this one quite a bit. Some volumes, around volume 5, volume 6, I kind of lost a little bit of interest in the series. However, I kept with it and fell in love with it once again. A young man is stabbed and reincarnated to another world. While dying, he wishes that the pain would go away, and, well, he's reborn as a slime. Of course, this is an isekai, so the slime quickly becomes super overpowered, but what I love about this series isn't necessarily the overpowered slime antics. What I do love is the world building, quite literally, as Rimuru the slime takes over the forest of Jura, collecting powerful monster allies and wanting to make a peaceful life for everyone. It blends the best of world building, politics, and even over-the-top battle shonen fights alongside your friends. You just know the general gist of this series. Now, like I said, this one bounces back and forth between styles for a while before settling down and mixing things up. I feel like once it hits volume 7, each and every volume becomes almost perfect. A huge treat whenever a new volume does appear. My next title is one that I find myself enjoying more as a huge binge, rather than picking up each volume individually. So, actually, I'm a little bit behind on this one. Oh well. Now, of course, this is ReZero, and what can I say about this series that I haven't already? Not much. A young boy is transported into another world, and his Pokemon power is that he comes back to life whenever he dies. Similar to having a save point in a game, he dies over and over, trying to get the best possible outcome for the world and himself. Now, this is one I've gone on and spoken about multiple times, hyping it up, and you know what, I'm just going to leave a link in the description if you want my full opinion on this light novel. It's such a great one that I just get addicted every time I open the pages, and I look forward to a few volumes being released so I can binge it all. Frederica is best girl. Next up is a title that I recently completed reading last year, and I regularly return to the anime. We have Toradora. A young man, Takasu Ryuji, he looks like a delinquent, but is actually a really nice guy. He's overjoyed when he finds that his crush is in the same class as him, until he encounters Asaika Tiger, known as the Palm Top Tiger. She's head over heels with his best friend, and so they come up with an agreement to support each other and hook each other up. Now, this is one of those slice of life titles that has long been a classic in the anime fandom, but one that I don't really see many people talking about the light novel, and you know, it's a shame as it's just as good. If you love the anime, then I'd really recommend checking this one out. It just feels so rewarding seeing two people destined for each other, growing fonder for each other as time goes by. It's almost perfect. My next title is another one that I feel is an absolute classic and one absolutely beloved by anime fans. It is, of course, Spice and Wolf. Now, Spice and Wolf is just a fun, charming series, and one that I really feel shows the power of the medium. A traveller merchant is searching for profit. He finds a naked girl with the ears and tail of a wolf asleep in his cart. No, it isn't a friend, it's Holo, a harvest goddess who longs to return to her beloved home. I never thought that a series about economics would wind its way into my heart as much as this one did, and I'd encourage everyone to check it out. You won't get your usual isekai shenanigans, no, you won't get stupidly overpowered protagonists. You'll instead get one of the most beautiful series out there. Now, this has been released in individual formats and a huge, massive Yen Press special edition collector's release, so pick your poison and check out Spice and Wolf. You will not regret it. We're into the final 3 now, and it's about time we talk about So I'm a Spider, So What? Another one of those reborn as a thing isekai titles that we all know and begrudgingly absolutely adore. So what makes this one so good? A young girl and her entire class are killed in a freak accident, bringing everyone into another world, while some are reborn as the hero himself, his allies, others are reborn as vampires, demons, and one of them, a small spider, instantly thrown into the danger zone as her own mother attempts to eat her. This little spider soon discovers it's kill or be killed and begins her quest for survival. This is another one of those series that just has such a simple plot but is done so well. While the spider's escapades are always a joy, the series jumps back and forth between that and the story of the hero and other important characters. This makes the world feel so much huger than it is, and you can't help but be excited for their eventual meeting. The series is easy to read, and I feel it's a perfect entry for those wanting to get into light novels. It's one of those titles that you just expect one thing and it manages to just pull out something completely different, and it's definitely one of the best examples of how the isekai genre can have similar plots but do something amazing individually. Absolutely 100% recommend checking this one out. Number 2, and we have, you guessed it, Konosuba. Now previously when I did my top 10 light novels, this one was actually at number 1, and I still absolutely adore it to this day. A young man is killed in an almost pathetic way. He is given the option to take one thing with him to another world. What does he pick? The goddess in front of him that's making fun of him. Now throw in a mage who can only use explosions once a day, and a crusader who absolutely loves getting hurt, and you have an interesting combination. Well, that would be if this goddess was even useful at all. She isn't. This series takes almost every trope found in other isekai and JRPGs and just pokes fun at it. Rather than characters to inspire you, you have the worst characters. But seeing them evolve and mature and even grow over the course of the series is really nice. It's definitely wormed its way into my heart as one of my favourites, and it's always the thing I look forward to the most whenever a new volume drops. However, there's one that excites me a little bit more, and we all know it's Buck Naked in Another World. What can I say about the fantastic amazingness, pure awesomeness that is that title? Only joking. I mean, come on, I've got at least some sense. And again, Monster Girl Doctor was high on my list. Anyways, number 1 is, of course, the one, the only Overlord. I mean, I can't really imagine a series that I could put here instead, except Konosuba on a good day. Overlord is just that series that is just so well thought out and so well put together that I just want to read it over and over. When an agent MMO is about to shut its servers, the only one left from a huge guild is the skeleton Momonga. When the shutdown actually happens, Momonga discovers that the game hasn't vanished, and instead finds himself trapped inside the game. Taking on the name of the guild, Ainz Al Ghun, Momonga begins to explore the world in an attempt to figure out what has happened and find his friends. This is one of those power fantasy series, but is incredibly well done to boot. So much care has gone into this series that it not only makes Ainz look incredibly strong, but while also keeping him rather naive to the workings of the world. Most overpowered series focus on how strong the character is, however in Overlord's case it builds up the world around him. We get to see the workings of the human world, the power of the lizard men, and the majesty of the dragons, all built up incredibly well, only to be defeated by Ainz or even one of his underlings. Overlord is always a huge treat whenever a volume appears, that it always feels like something special when one does so, and I can't recommend it enough. It absolutely deserves to be really high on this list.